The British thought it was only a stool. That was their first mistake. In the year 1900, deep in Asante land, one demand turned silence into war. To outsiders, it may have sounded strange. How could a stool cause an uprising? How could one object bring chiefs, warriors, women, villages, and an empire into conflict? But this was not just a stool. This was the Golden Stool. And to Asante, it carried the soul of a nation. The Golden Stool was not furniture. It was not decoration. It was not a chair waiting for any powerful man to sit on it. It represented the spirit of Asante itself, the unity of the people, the authority of the kingdom, the sacred bond between the living, the dead, and those yet to come. Some things can be stolen. Some things can be bought. Some things can be displayed like trophies. But some things are protected by a whole people. The British did not understand this. Or perhaps they understood it too late. Before the great insult was spoken, British power had already entered Kumasi. Asante had been wounded. Its king, Prempeh I, had been sent into exile. British authority pressed harder and harder. Soldiers marched through the dust. Officers arrived with confidence. Their uniforms were pressed, their rifles were ready, and they believed control was already theirs. But control is not the same as respect, and Asante had not surrendered its soul. Inside the council space, the chiefs understood the danger. They were not ignorant men. They knew what British power could do. They had seen exile. They had seen punishment. They had seen a kingdom forced to bow under pressure. But this demand was different. This was not only about land. It was not only about taxes. It was not only about political power. The British wanted the Golden Stool, not to protect it, not to honor it, but to possess it. And according to the memory of the story, they wanted to sit upon it. To the British, it may have looked like authority. To Asante, it was humiliation. They did not just ask for gold. They asked Asante to kneel. The room did not explode. There was no instant roar, no wild shouting, no dramatic rush to war. Sometimes the deepest anger arrives as silence. The chiefs sat with the weight of what had just been said. Some looked down. Some stared ahead. Some held their anger behind still faces. Fear does not always look like running. Sometimes fear looks like silence. And in that silence, Asante had to decide what it was willing to lose. Then the Queen Mother rose, a woman of authority, a woman of memory, a woman who understood that this was not about a piece of gold, it was about the spirit of a people. She had watched Asante leaders taken away. She had watched British power tighten its grip. She had watched men hesitate under the weight of consequence. But the Golden Stool was different. If Asante gave up the stool, it would not only lose an object, it would lose the symbol of itself. So when silence became dangerous, she gave it a voice. And the room began to change. Heads lifted, eyes turned. Fear did not disappear, but courage entered the room. Her words did not remain inside the council. They moved through courtyards, through villages, through forest paths. Drums carried the warning. Messengers carried the call. Women gathered supplies. Men prepared weapons. Elders gave instructions. Villages listened. What began as an insult became an uprising. The British came looking for a seat. They found a war. Soon, the British position in Kumasi was under siege. The fort that had been built to represent control began to feel like a prison. Outside its walls, Asante fighters knew the land. They knew the trees. They knew the hidden paths. They knew when to move, when to wait, and when silence itself could become a weapon. Smoke rose around the fort. The forest pressed in. British defenders watched the shadows, and for once, the empire was not advancing. It was surrounded. Inside the fort, confidence began to fade. Heat pressed in. Supplies shrank. Men counted what remained. Food, water, ammunition, hope. Every sound beyond the walls carried danger. A branch breaking, a drum in the distance, a voice outside the stockade. The soldiers had weapons, but the forest had patience. And day after day, the pressure grew. This was not a war of open fields and easy marching. The forest changed everything. The Asante understood the land. They used shadow, cover, patience, knowledge. The British had rifles, but every road had to be crossed. Every path had to be trusted. Every tree could hide danger. The British had more firepower, but Asante had the forest, and in that forest, the empire felt uncertain. But resistance has a cost. War strains the body. It strains the land, and it strains even the strongest people. Villages suffered, fighters fell. Families waited for people who did not return. The smoke did not only rise from battle, it rose from homes, from fear, from grief, from everything war leaves behind. Courage can begin a resistance, but sacrifice is what carries it. In time, the Queen Mother was captured. She was taken from the land she had called to defend. But she did not leave the story as a defeated woman. She left it as a symbol. They could guard her body. They could escort her away. They could send her far from Asante, but they could not make her small. She had stood when silence was easier. She had spoken when fear was safer. And still, the Golden Stool remained, untouched, uncaptured, unseated. The British won the campaign. They captured leaders. They punished resistance. They brought Asante under colonial rule. But the thing they wanted most remained beyond them. No British governor sat on it. No empire claimed the soul of Asante. The war was never only about territory. It was about meaning. And the Golden Stool was never truly theirs.
Yaa Asantewaa's resistance became more than a single war. It became memory. It became warning. It became pride. A reminder that power is not always measured by the army that wins the campaign. Sometimes, power is measured by what a people refuse to surrender. The British could bring soldiers. They could build forts. They could send leaders into exile. But they could not erase what the stool meant, and they could not erase the woman who rose to defend it. The empire won the war, but it never sat on the soul of Asante. That is why this story still carries power, not simply because she fought, but because she refused to let fear decide the future, and that is why the Golden Stool never fell.